Many men believe that the more they chase a woman, the stronger her emotional attraction will become. As a result, they are always the first to send a message, constantly check in, and make themselves available whenever she needs them. Deep down, they fear that if they stop chasing her, they will lose her completely. However, what many men fail to understand is that stepping back can sometimes have the opposite effect. In certain situations, the moment a man stops chasing is the moment a woman begins to notice his absence on a much deeper emotional level. When someone is always available, predictable, and consistently present, their attention can gradually become something the other person takes for granted. But when that familiar pattern suddenly changes, it often creates space for curiosity. She may begin thinking about him more often, her emotions may become more noticeable, and questions that never crossed her mind before can start surfacing naturally. Because what actually happens inside a woman's mind when a man pulls his energy back is much deeper psychologically than most men have ever been told. The first thing that often happens when you stop chasing her is that her mind becomes louder instead of quieter. This is the part many men never witnessed because, on the surface, it may seem as though nothing has changed. She may not reach out or show obvious signs of missing you, leading many men to believe she has already moved on or no longer cares. In reality, that isn't always what's happening. When your attention was always available, your presence became something she naturally expected. It wasn't necessarily that she disliked it, it simply became a normal part of her life. She knew you would send the first message, check in regularly, remain emotionally available, and continue investing in the connection regardless of the circumstances. Because your attention was so consistent, she never had the opportunity to truly experience what life felt like without it. However, once you quietly stop chasing her, something begins to shift inside her mind. Questions start appearing that never crossed her mind before. Why has his behavior changed? Has he emotionally let go of me? Is someone else getting his attention now? Why do I suddenly notice his absence so much more than I expected? Ironically, this is often the point where she begins thinking about you more than she did when you were constantly present. Distance has a way of making people feel emotions they overlooked when someone was always there. Sometimes, absence creates emotional awareness in ways constant availability never can. The second thing that happens when you stop chasing is that she begins questioning everything she believed she knew about you. Many men underestimate how powerful this shift can be. Familiarity allows people to feel comfortable because everything seems predictable. Uncertainty, however, forces the mind to search for answers. Previously, your feelings were obvious to her. She knew you cared, knew you would initiate conversations, and trusted that your attention wasn't going anywhere. Since everything felt so certain, she had little reason to reflect deeply on your value or your place in her life. You had become emotionally predictable. Once that chase disappears, though, her perspective starts changing. She may begin wondering whether she misunderstood you all along. Did he genuinely lose interest? Was I too emotionally distant? Did I take his attention for granted? Was he more important to me than I realized? Those unanswered questions naturally create emotional curiosity. As certainty fades, the mind becomes increasingly engaged. She starts replaying old conversations from a different perspective. Moments that once seemed insignificant suddenly carry new meaning. Even your silence begins communicating something emotionally, causing her to think about you in ways she never did before. This is often the stage where genuine curiosity develops towards someone she once believed she had completely figured out. The third thing that happens when you stop chasing is that your absence gradually becomes more impactful than your constant presence ever was. Many men find this difficult to accept because they assume attraction grows only through greater effort, more communication, and endless availability. Yet human emotions don't always respond that way. When someone knows they can always reach you whenever they choose, your presence slowly becomes familiar and expected. Again, that doesn't mean it is unwanted, it simply loses its sense of novelty. She becomes accustomed to the fact that you'll reply, initiate conversations, continue chasing, and keep the relationship moving forward regardless of what happens. When that pattern suddenly ends, however, your value begins to feel different. Uncertainty naturally captures attention. She starts noticing the empty spaces where your presence once existed. She realizes you're no longer the one initiating conversations. She becomes aware that your attention is no longer constantly surrounding her. Ironically, that distance often makes your presence feel even stronger because, for the first time, she has room to recognize what is actually missing. People frequently appreciate emotional value most clearly after the constant availability they once relied upon is no longer there. The fourth thing that happens when you stop chasing is that she begins to face her real feelings for you rather than simply responding to the attention you have been giving her. This is where the situation often becomes much more psychologically significant. Many women don't fully understand the depth of their emotional attachment while a man is consistently pursuing them. As long as you're always reaching out, initiating conversations, and keeping the connection alive, she doesn't have to examine her own emotions. She can simply enjoy your effort without asking herself what she truly feels. Once your chase comes to an end, however, the emotional dynamic shifts. She is suddenly left with a question she may have been avoiding: does she actually miss you, or does she only miss the attention you provided? For many women, the answer can be surprising. Little reminders begin to carry unexpected emotional weight. A familiar song may bring memories rushing back. An old conversation resurfaces in her mind. She may glance at her phone hoping to see your name, even if she'd never admit that to anyone. At that point, any feelings she experiences are no longer being sustained by your constant attention. Instead, they arise naturally from within her own emotions, making her attachment much clearer than before. The fifth thing that happens when you stop chasing is she often feels your silence much more deeply than she will ever admit openly. This is where many men misunderstand the situation. From the outside, she may appear perfectly calm, carrying on with life as if nothing has changed. Because of this, many assume she never cared. In reality, people often conceal their emotions, especially when pride, uncertainty, and vulnerability are involved. Acknowledging that your absence has affected her would also mean admitting she cared more than she previously showed, and many people struggle to face that truth. Rather than expressing those feelings openly, she may process them privately. She might notice when you stop viewing her social media updates, wonder why you haven't reached out, replay old conversations in her mind, or imagine what she would say if you contacted her again. Most of this emotional activity remains invisible. Although she appears composed on the outside, your silence may create far more internal reflection than you realize. After all, people who truly feel nothing rarely spend time wondering about someone who has disappeared from their lives. The sixth thing that happens when you stop chasing is that her true level of interest becomes much easier to understand. This is one of the most valuable outcomes because constant chase often hides the reality of the relationship. If you're always initiating conversations, making plans, and carrying the connection forward, she never has to demonstrate how much effort she's willing to contribute. Once you step back, everything changes. She now has to make a choice. Does she genuinely want to continue building the relationship, or was she simply enjoying the attention, reassurance, and comfort you consistently provided? Her response usually reveals the answer. A woman who sincerely values the connection will often find a reason to reach out because losing your presence won't feel right to her. On the other hand, if she makes no effort at all, you gain something equally important: clarity. Although that truth can be painful, knowing where you stand is far healthier than endlessly chasing someone who isn't moving toward you with the same level of interest. The seventh thing that happens when you stop chasing is that you finally receive her real emotional attention. Many men believe that chasing a woman constantly keeps them at the forefront of her mind. Yet, in many cases, the opposite is true. When your attention is always available, it becomes predictable. Predictability often reduces curiosity, emotional tension, and anticipation. Instead of standing out, your presence simply becomes part of her daily routine. When you step back, however, that routine is interrupted. She notices the silence where your messages used to be. She becomes aware of the space your attention once filled. That absence often encourages her to think about you more than she did when you were constantly available. The important point, however, is that this is not about manipulating someone, playing games, or pretending not to care. A man who genuinely chooses to stop chasing because he values his own peace, confidence, priorities, and self-respect naturally projects a different kind of energy. That quiet confidence is often noticeable to others. The greatest transformation, though, doesn't necessarily happen in her mind, it happens in yours. When you stop investing all of your emotional energy in someone who isn't matching your effort, you begin reconnecting with yourself. Your focus shifts toward your own goals, routines, personal growth, and emotional well-being. Instead of constantly wondering whether she'll text back, whether she's still interested, or whether you're receiving enough validation, your attention returns to building a fulfilling life of your own. That internal change is often visible. A man consumed by chasing may unintentionally come across as anxious, overly dependent on approval, or emotionally unsettled. By contrast, a man who is grounded in his own purpose and emotional stability tends to appear calmer, more confident, and more attractive. For this reason, some women become more interested after a man stops chasing, not because he has become distant or uncaring, but because he has stopped sacrificing his own well-being in an effort to keep someone else's attention.